What's up everybody, skyrocketing here and welcome to the review of the GeForce RTX 3070. So I've been using the RTX 3070 for more than 100 days now, and this is my complete review. I know that you guys have been waiting, I have kept you guys waiting for this review, but this is a detailed review that I really wanted to make just after buying the card. Now, before we jump straight into the review, let's talk about the GPU that I am using. Now, the GPU matters because it depends what type of GPU you are buying, what you get in stock. It may be factory overclocked, it may be from a board partner, and it may be the Founders Edition GPU. More or less, the performance remains quite similar. There's not so much difference to experience in performance, but still the GPU matters, and this case we are using the Gigabyte RTX 3070 OC8GB. Now this is a very nice GPU. This was the only thing available in stock after the launch, and I already had a nice talk with the retailer about giving me one so that I can buy one for my works. Now, the RTX 30 series GPUs will be mainly used by people for gaming, and that is the first thing I did in my benchmark for this thing. Now, Cyberpunk was a game that did a little bit problem to the GPU. I don't know why, but this thing crashed very often while playing the game, and playing a storyline based game, middle of a mission, when the game crashes, it feels kind of weird and you get that angry feeling in your mind that why? That's just because of the game engine. Now, a lot of things depend on game benchmarks. The OS, the specifications of your PC, the game drivers, and the game engine itself, and how well the game engine manages itself to optimize with all the things, all the hardware that you have on your system. I tested all the games at 4K and with ray tracing on and DLSS on, because you are buying this graphic card, so you will be anyhow using all those features that are available with the hardware acceleration. The first game that I tested was Cyberpunk 2077, because this was the most anticipated game of the decade, which ended up being a sort of failure, I would say, but I am no one to judge. You will judge the game, because I don't play much games, as you have already seen me telling this thing in all my previous videos, I guess. Okay, so without any much further ado, let's start. So the first thing that you would notice are the game settings I'm playing with. I'm playing at ultra settings with very high and ultra combination for most of the things, and there are things like Psycho, but that graphic settings is not, I guess, applicable to 3070. If you are using something like a 3080 or 3090, then use that, because Cyberpunk is a very hardware demanding game. And this thing's got 8 gigs of VRAM, and that thing handled Cyberpunk pretty much well. Now, I tested the game with ray tracing at ultra and DLSS at performance and ultra performance. At performance mode, as you can see, the frames are something around from 40 to 45. But don't worry, I was playing the game and recording the game at the same time, which technically means you are losing out 5 to 7 frames per second because of that recording happening in the background, that too a high bitrate recording. And at ultra performance mode, it was way above 60, but since I was recording and playing the game at the same time, that background recording hampered that frame. But still, as you can see, that though I am recording, this thing hits pretty much 60 all the time at ultra performance mode. Now, there are some things that I need to tell you about DLSS. DLSS is deep learning super sampling, which technically means that your game is rendered at a specific resolution that is lower than the native resolution you are playing and is upscaled to that resolution. Which means that if you're playing at DLSS quality, it is rendered at 1600p and then upscaled to 4K. If you're playing at DLSS balanced, this thing is running on 1440p and then upscaled to 4K. If you're playing on DLSS performance, it's something like 1300 1080p and then upscale to 4K, and if you are playing at DLSS ultra performance, it's something like 1080 or 1120 pixels and then upscale to 4K. But let me tell you, the upscaling is not bad at all. The hardware acceleration done by the tensor cores while upscaling the game to 4K while rendering at a lower resolution than the native resolution is done pretty much well on this GPU. This thing handles it fine, and I didn't test the other two DLSS modes that were quality and balanced, because that is pretty much useless, because more or less you are playing something like Cyberpunk. You will be wanting to get something above 30-40 frames per second, and performance mode keeps everything look smooth and while maintaining the quality, while ultra performance is something like, you know, maintained at a little bit lower resolution than 4K. Especially the buildings at a further location were a little bit hazy to watch, but still playable and very much enjoyable. The next game that we tested was Control, and this is also a very nice game that represents ray tracing. Now you can see in the settings bar at what resolution this thing is rendered in while DLSS is turned on. That is 1440 by 2560, which is a nice resolution to render in and then upscale to 4K. Now all the rules follow same for this thing. This thing doesn't though have the settings for choosing the type of DLSS. This thing has the settings for choosing at what resolution you would end up rendering the game and then upscaling it, but that doesn't really matter because the game runs smooth with the highest settings possible with this GPU. Now the graphics are good, the reflections and all the things that the game provides are nice, the visuals are very nice to look upon, and the frames are hovering around 50-55. Now that's because I'm recording the game at the same time while playing it, which again decreases the FPS from 5 to somewhere 7. And the next game that we tested is Metro Exodus. Now I benchmarked this thing while recording again a 5 to 7 FPS drop while recording, but this thing handled pretty well. The visuals of Metro Exodus are also very much nice, and the storyline is also very much nice, but this is not a game review, so we shouldn't waste time talking about the storyline. Anyhow, the game looked fine on this thing, and the visuals were very immersive to look upon, and the frames were pretty much always above 50-55 when playing the game, and always 60 while not recording but only playing the game at the same time. Okay, so the next game that we tested was Valoran. Now that thing doesn't represent ray tracing or DLSS, but has some features like NVIDIA Reflex, which is a nice feature to have on. But let's talk about the FPS. As you can see, this thing is hovering midway around 200, averaging around 200 all the time, sometimes going up, sometimes going a little bit down, but that's okay. That's completely playable for an FPS game. I mean, very much playable, very nicely, extremely smoothly playable, to be honest. And the reflexes were nice because of NVIDIA Reflex turned on. NVIDIA Reflex turned on makes the latency between your mouse, keyboard, your GPU, monitor, and the whole system very much low compared to the standard latency that you would get while it is turned off, which makes you a better first-person shooter player. That is claimed by NVIDIA. I'm not a first-person shooter professional esports player, so I don't know much about that. But that's it for the gaming benchmarks, and I think this is more than enough for gaming benchmarks, because the 3 games that represent ray tracing and DLSS are pretty much enough for testing the capabilities of a GPU. That too with a game like Cyberpunk 2077, which puts a GPU to its knees. Okay, so for synthetic benchmarks we used Blender. Blender is one of the most popular and a very much hardware demanding at the same time synthetic benchmarking software for your GPU, and the results came out were pretty good. For BMW we got a 17-second render time. For Classroom it was 55 seconds. For Fishy Cat it was 31 seconds. For Coro it was 1 minute 8 seconds, and for Pavilion Barcelona it was 1 minute 16 seconds, which is pretty much close to all the values that you get in the Blender website. Now I am using Windows for the benchmark, so it might not be as optimum as those that we see in the Blender websites, because the benchmark results seen in the official website of Blender are a little bit lower, like 1 second, 2 second, 5 second gaps. Now that's because they are using Linux for benchmarking and not Windows. So, which means that pretty much the results are same at this point. Okay, so now let's come to video editing. Now I ran Premiere Pro for more than 15 days with the system, and I think that's a pretty much good example of how good this GPU will be in long term for productivity. So I normally edited 4K 420 8-bit files on the system. The recordings that I do are not so heavy, with a bitrate ranging from 5 to 15 Mbps, which I think is a breeze for the 3070 to work with. Render times were pretty low. A 10-minute video more or less renders in 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how heavy the layers are on the videos. And also Premiere Pro crashes very often. If you are a Premiere Pro user, you know how annoying it is. But normally the autosave feature that is available in Premiere Pro, that normally autosaves the projects after working for like 5 minutes of editing on this thing like autosaves the projects, and that is a pretty much good thing. Lastly, let's talk about GPU prices skyrocketing, because that's one of the major issues that has been happening. So if I go to a website like something like Newegg, a 2070 Super is available from the range of $800 to all the way up to $3,000, which is baseless, to be honest. Like, that doesn't make sense. There are 3070 pre-builds, but I am the type of person who doesn't trust pre-built PCs. All the 30 series GPUs itself are out of stock, let alone the RTX 3070. And the RTX 3060 just came out, and that thing is going for $400, $500 with some manufacturers, and that is just disgusting to see upon. Now, what lies to the end of the review is that should I recommend anyone to buy the RTX 3070? The answer is yes. I highly recommend anyone with a budget of $500 to buy an RTX 3070. The GPU I am using costs $650, but that doesn't justify what brand you are buying. That is just the maximum retail price of a GPU, and with offers and all that, you can get over it with $600. Now, the things I am saying should have been applicable if all the things were available in stock. As all the things are not available in stock, all the things are not going as we wished it would have gone, I can recommend this card, but no one will be eventually able to buy an RTX 3070 or any 3000 series GPU. You are at checkout and you see that it's out of stock. It's so annoying to see, and I can understand, and I hope Nvidia fixes this issue. They have already launched dedicated chipsets for mining, and I guess that will fix the issue to some extent, if not fully. That's been it for this review. Thanks for watching, and I'll be making a dedicated review of the 3070 for machine learning and deep learning, so stay tuned for that. With that being said, this is Shuragnik signing off, and I'll see you in the next one.